Well, this chapter confirms a couple of things. Number one, what Diane and King were going through, this entire flashback, it was reality. It was actually real. It was not an illusion. It wasn't made up. It was very real. So that means that our characters, Diane and King, they went back into the past. Now, from what I understood, from what was explained from the previous Fairy King, is that you can go there, you can interact, but there is an invisible force, which that's not clarified what is exactly correcting it, but there is an invisible force working to correct history if you try to make any simple changes. But on top of that, if you make too drastic of a change, if you're sent back like, you are there, like, how King and Diane is, it will eject you out and then throw you back into your body, which is how King was able to return in the first place. That's why he's safe and sound. And it explains how you could possibly die in this flashback because you're really in the past. And so, if you were to die, it's like your spirit died and you're gone. Because your body's still there in the future and it's over because you went back in the past. And that's not necessarily completely explained. There's a little bit of things that needs to be explained when it comes to that. But I'm going to assume, judging by the actual timeline and the changes and stuff, I'm assuming it works similar to Steins Gate. And what I'm getting at is in Steins Gate, don't want to give too many spoilers here, so this might be a little bit spoilerish, but if it is, please forgive me. But, in Steins Gate, there is, like, an example to where if you're in this certain timeline, you can do whatever you want, but the end result is still the same. No matter how much you try to change it, do a different path, walk down a different street, go down and go to a train station, whatever, no matter what you do, the end result is still the same. And I kind of feel like that was what this was trying to say. That even though King and Diane, they were in this, flashback in the past, and they were in reality, no matter what they were doing or interacting, trying to do little things that were changing things, time would still end up in the same spot with how it is right now. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there can't be slight changes. Now, I'm going to assume that what's going on with Diane and then the real Galther and then how he was going to probably give back her memories, I'm going to assume that could possibly carry over to her in the future, her present-day self. But there is a little bit of things when it comes to this time travel that wasn't necessarily explained, but I feel like this is going to be very important in the future. I have a very, very, very sinking suspicion that this is going to be very vital for parts of the end game of the series, because one of the big ongoing themes with Taizai is reincarnation. We know about this thanks to what is happening with Elizabeth, but also Meliodas and how he cannot die. And then let's think about Galther as well. He was technically reborn into a doll-like self. Reincarnation is a big ongoing theme in this series, and there is a lot of characters you could say are carbon copies of other characters. Let's, compare, our two Fairy Kings. They're very identical. They both have sisters. They both had people in their past that were with their sisters and they didn't really like. Bon and King, and then the previous Fairy King and Ro. They had people they didn't really like, and then it led them to do certain similar decisions. And I feel like this is a message from Nakaba-sensei. He's trying to let us know that maybe something is going on here. Maybe this entire timeline, for instance, the past, it's very deeply connected to what is happening right now. Maybe these characters, this is hypothetical, okay? I'm not going to say that this is true or not, okay? I'm just going to throw that out there, take this with a grain of salt, okay? I'm not saying that this is what's really going on, but this is hypothetical. Because of the constant reoccurring theme of reincarnation in Taizai, I could see Nakaba-sensei going down the path to letting us know that maybe all of these characters in the past, like, let's say the previous Fairy King and all that, and how he has a very similar design, like in terms of just the way his character is to King, but also his sister to Ro and all that. What if our characters, in some way, all of our characters were reincarnations of other characters from the past? I mean, let's think about it like this. Elizabeth, constant reincarnations. Galther, pretty much reincarnation of the real Galther. We have the entire situation, what was very suspicious with, what's going on now with the Fairy Kings, and then, Ro and Bon, they're very similar in terms of designs. I mean, there's a lot of things about these characters that there's a lot of similarities, and many might want to chop it up as lazy design, lazy writing, or maybe just Nakaba-sensei doesn't know how to do different type of characters. But I feel like there is more here, because Nakaba-sensei has proven, he has proven a lot. He knows how to foreshadow. He knows how to set up plot points and make it make sense. He did that stuff with, Elizabeth. The, actual foreshadowing to her possibility of being a reincarnation, to Hawk and all that being linked to Meliodas' bird, to, all the other different tiny little details we've seen throughout the series and all that. The stuff with also what was going on with Galther, how there was a lot of suspicious stuff going with him. So, with all of these little details, we do know that Nakaba-sensei is good at foreshadowing. I'm not saying he's the best, but he's good at it. And what if this entire flashback was letting us know, once again, another subtle hint that maybe reincarnation is going to play a bigger role in this series? And that's what's going on with King and all that in these relationships with the other characters and why there is a lot of similarities. I mean, let's look at it like this, okay? The previous Fairy King and King, they are pretty much the same character. Just design-wise, they're a little bit different, but they're kind of the same character. Just different timelines, different periods of their life. And they both went down a very similar path. King was very mad with Bon. He wanted to kill Bon. Like, he didn't like Bon at all. Like, he wanted that man to be dead. We had a point in the manga to where King was like that. And we have it to where, the previous King, he also was very angry. He was very upset, and his rage and anger consumed him, and he killed Ro. And King went down a similar path, but he managed to correct his mistake and not go back to where he could never return from, like down that path. He was able to, go back up the path and then change it once again. And sadly enough, the previous Fairy King, he can't change that. But King made the proper decision. And this chapter kind of reflects that fact that even though they're very similar, King was able to make the better choice. He realized from his own experiences throughout life that it wouldn't make any sense if he was to kill Ro. Number one, because he was able to look at the circumstances behind it. What led Ro to do what he was doing? Because sometimes you don't have the full picture of why someone does these despicable acts. I mean, let's think about Hindi. This entire character Hindi that was built up in the first 100 chapters of Taizai, we found out he was being manipulated. He wasn't really the big bad. He wasn't someone that was truly completely evil. He just had his own things that were off about him. And this is what King has learned time and time again with all the major foes he has fought. And that's very similar to what's going on with Ro. He's also a person that has been manipulated thanks to others, and that is why he acts like he does. And so King understood from his previous experiences in life that it wouldn't help him at all if he was to take out his anger towards Ro and kill him. But then, let's factor also what happened, or what could have happened, if King would have killed Ro. If King would have killed Ro right then and there, King would have been consumed by rage, madness, and all of that, and he would have walked down a very similar path to what the previous Fairy King did. And this is what's very suspicious about the timeline, the entirety of this, timeline, because there's details that need some clarification, because there's a lot of things there that needs explaining, because it doesn't make too much sense at this moment, because this is one of the big things that stood out to me. If King would have made the decision to kill Ro, he would have been stuck in that timeline. He would have been stuck. He would have went past what he was doing already. He would have stayed in the previous Fairy King's body, and he would have went on a rampage, killing people and all that, and eventually joining, the Ten Commandments. That's what King would have done if he would have done that despicable act. And that makes me question what would happen. I mean, if that was King, and if the past is actually reality, and it can supposedly change history because there's an invisible force trying to correct history, what does that mean if King didn't make that decision to not kill Ro? Like, if he would have killed Ro, what would have happened to our present-day King? Like, if he would have went down the same path as the previous Fairy King inside of his body, would he have separated from that body and then become his own person but went down a similar path? Would he have stayed in that body, and would he just become him? I mean, there's a lot of questions I have about that just doesn't make a lot of sense, and so I feel like there is more going on here in terms of timelines and, you know, the way time can be changed or shifted, reincarnation. There's definitely something playing a big role here that we're not really understanding, and most likely Nakaba-sensei will eventually explain this. Now, besides all of that, though, King seems to be getting his wings. He has actually his wings probably growing out because he was having some pain towards the end of the chapter. He was just struggling and all that, and you see how he's grabbing himself. It most likely is wings growing out of his back. That was one of the big things about King that he was lacking as a fairy, and we've always been talking about this. He doesn't have wings. He's very different from a fairy. Even though he is the fairy king, you'd think he would have wings, but he doesn't, and he's already incredibly powerful, but if he is growing his wings, that's definitely going to be a power boost. That's going to be a jump in power. He's going to be able to use his weapon probably more efficiently. And so I'm kind of curious if that's what's going on with him. Now, Diane, as well, she's going through her own trial, and she's probably going to have to make a decision that, Balor was never able to make. She's going to have to make a decision to where, she doesn't do whatever despicable act he probably did in the past. I'm kind of curious to see what, Diane's going to choose and what decision she's going to make. Because, I mean, we got to factor this in right now. King is no longer in that, flashback anymore. So, if you look at it like that, that would mean that Diane would be actually interacting with the real previous Fairy King. It will no longer be King. So, I wonder what she's going to do when she interacts with him. I wonder how that's going to go down. But anyways, though, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I love you all so much. Please be safe. Chibi out.